Over the past few months, we've been updating you on the progress of the Polar Bear Odyssey here at Como Zoo. And with Neil and Buzz, our beloved polar bears, on vacation for over a year now, we started to miss seeing bears around here. So we went out tracking bears and came across photographer Daniel Cox, who has spent some close-up and personal time with some polar bears. He has brought his amazing photos here for the Arctic Ambassador Polar Bear Photo Exhibit, which will run through April 26th. Daniel Cox, a Minnesota native, has spent years photographing polar bears in their natural habitat of Churchill, Canada. For 25 years, Cox has been pursuing his lifelong dream of photographing nature in all its elements. He's traveled to all 7 continents, plying his craft in search of the images that help tell the stories and inspire his art. Dan is a regular contributor to natural history publications worldwide. His most personally satisfying accomplishments have been the 2 cover stories he produced for National Geographic. So joining me now is this photographer, fantastic photographer, Dan Cox. Dan, thanks so much for being out here today.
My pleasure.
Really
Good to be
appreciate
here.
it.
Yeah.
Great. So you're from a town called Twig, Minnesota. I got to start with this. Is there really a town called Twig, Minnesota?
There is definitely a town called Twig, Minnesota, and it's on a little spot on the highway heading on 53 north towards the Canadian border between just south of Virginia and Eveleth, and it's a little town that if you blink twice, you're going to miss it on your way through, but it's there.
All right, I'll believe you. Maybe I'll have to visit that sometime. Well, thanks so much for coming back to Minnesota, because now I believe you live in Montana.
I do live in Montana and have been there for a number of years, but have lots of family here, and a couple of sisters in the Twin Cities and some sisters in Duluth. We had a big family, so it's okay. Spread out, and I have lots of places to come visit back here.
Beautiful. Well, what got you into photography?
Well, it started fairly early on in my teenage years. I was about 16 years old. My father introduced me to cameras at about 14 or 15, and spent a lot of years hunting and fishing with my dad, my cousins, and lots of family members. Caught the photography bug at about 16, and wanted to combine my passion for photography with my passion for the outdoors, and that's how it all kind of started. So it was around 16 years old.
Now, you grew up north, where it's cold. I would think a guy like you would want to go where it's warm. Any Minnesotan, I think, would go where it's warm to do this, but you chose to go further north.
Well, it's interesting. I've had other people ask me that, but when you have a tendency to really, when you grow up in some place that's really unique and interesting and different, and it may be cold, but you learn to dress for it, you learn to live with it, and I think it's one of the advantages I have as a young boy growing up in temperatures. Literally, the first time we moved to the farm in northern Minnesota, just outside of Duluth, we had 50 degrees below zero. I remember the first day we were in that little farmhouse, my father looking at the temperatures and saying, "My goodness, 50 degrees below zero." I had never heard of such temperature. So it was, I think, an advantage to be a young man growing up in a cold climate, and it takes me further north now to see these unique environments of the Arctic.
Well, Dan, thanks so much for bringing these photos to Como. They're absolutely beautiful. What do you hope the folks who come visit will take away from this? Well,
my hope is working with this group, Polar Bears International. Our goal is to help educate the public to the plight of polar bears. Originally, it started out polar bears, but it's fast become an organization that is explaining and talking to folks about the whole issue of climate change, because as we see the climate continue to warm and the ice begin to melt in the north, in the very far north, the Arctic, these bears will lose the platform that they need to get out onto to hunt seals. And if they don't have the ice, they are a doomed species, and we're seeing that happening quickly.
Now, Dan, a lot of these pictures, I mean, these are very close pictures, these polar bears. Were you really that close to these polar bears?
Well, most of the images here in this exhibit are the pictures I shot with Dr. Steve Anstrup, the polar bear scientist. He's the lead scientist for the USGS, and I accompanied him in a couple different seasons up in the far Arctic, north of Alaska, on the Beaufort Sea, to get close to these animals. And so a lot of the pictures you're seeing are images of him working with these bears. Most of them are sedated. The ones that aren't sedated, we were photographing from a helicopter. So it was safe, but it definitely inspiring to be next to some of these bears were in the 1,000 to 1,200 pound range. And to be that close to these animals is quite invigorating, to say the least.
Right. Now, Dan, on this photo, the bear is literally smudging his nose against your camera.
He did smudge his nose against the camera, and I actually had to clean it after that one particular image. But what's interesting is that that image was shot with a remote camera. It's very important to remember that being too close to these animals can be dangerous for yourself, and if it's dangerous for you, it becomes dangerous for them. Because if you get hurt, the bear or the animal that you're working with is always the one that loses in the end. So on this extremely wide angle stuff, I use remote cameras, and I got this image with a remote camera that then I did have to eventually wait for the bear to move away and go out and clean the lens, because he was close, and it was actually a female, and she came up and was intrigued by the noise of the camera and put her nose right on the lens, and I got this picture just before she fouled the lens up and you couldn't see through it anymore.
Oh, it's a perfect picture. And on this particular picture, you have the mother bear and 2 cubs, but one cub, I'm afraid, maybe met a sad fate.
He did. It's an image you're talking about that is actually a series of images that was taken back in the mid-90s, 1996 actually. We had a female bear with 2 cubs. We followed her for 5 days. It was obvious on the first day that this little cub was sick. He was not keeping up. He was defecating blood, and because we saw this, we said we got to stop and see what happens. And so we stayed with this particular family, and over about a 5-day period, he died. We don't know why he died. We don't know why he was sick, but she stayed with this little guy for 2 days after he died, protecting him from other bears that were in the area, and eventually finally had to move on. But it was a difficult thing to watch, and I don't take it lightly. But we, as photographers, or even if you were up there in that situation and had an interest in trying to help the little cub, it's impossible to do that. The mother doesn't know that you're trying to help him. She thinks you're actually trying to hurt him, and it's very difficult to argue with about an 800-pound female polar bear. So yeah, tough thing to watch, but it is part of what nature is all about. And nature is not kind. It's a tough life out there for these animals, and it's one of the reasons we're really wanting to get the message out that they have a tough enough life without having the problems of climate change. And if we can reduce our carbon footprint as humans to help stop the part that we're contributing to the climate change equation, then these animals will have a much easier time continuing to live and exist.
And your job, really your art, is to not interfere at all, just to observe.
It is. I look at my work as a journalist, and although I do have images that I actually create as art, but my first job is to document this incredible natural world that I've chosen to specialize in. And during that time, it's very rewarding to show the lives of these animals and not interfere in that way, and show what really happens in their daily lives. But it's also rewarding to select specific images out of those pictures to offer people as items of an artistic bent, and hopefully gain appreciation from the folks who are viewing those images for this subject matter, in this particular situation, polar bears.
So Dan, are there some websites that the folks can go and check out?
You bet. There's a good one called polarbearsinternational.org, and it gives you a lot of information on the bears themselves, the science that's going on with them, and you can also become a member of PBI. If you're interested, we'd love to have you come visit our website at naturalexposures.com, and we've got information on there about some of the other conservation projects that I work with, as well as some of my work as fine art prints and workshops that we do and all that sort of thing.
Dan, thanks so much for coming to Como Zoo and sharing these fabulous photographs with us.
It's my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun here, coming here to share these pictures with the people of St. Paul.
Great. Well, folks, this is truly an amazing exhibit that you all have to come and check out. It's fantastic, and it runs through April 26th. So as you may know, Como Zoo is in the midst of building a new polar bear habitat called Polar Bear Odyssey, which will be opening in 2010. So keep watching Channel 18 for more updates on that progress, or go to comozooandconservatory.org.